This is our Community Connect webinar. The topic is Get Your CV Sorted, the top 5 errors you need to avoid. And we like to start with people sharing an answer to a prompt in chat. So have a look at this prompt. How does the thought of writing, updating your CV make you feel? How does the thought of writing and updating your CV make you feel? So let's see, what do you all think of this prompt and how do people feel in chat? I'm really curious. And by the way, Fiona, if you see other people coming in a little bit later, please feel free to admit them. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Anxious, yeah, totally relate to that one. Overwhelmed, daunting, yeah, tired, trepidatious. I hope I'm saying that word right. Um, Excited but daunting. Yeah, so mixed feelings for sure. Confused and frustrated, anxious again, nervous, overwhelmed, stressful, tedious, scared, and always unsure of whether it is correct format or not. Yep, a lot of like questions and if it's the right thing that you're doing or not. Lost. Yep, I felt that for sure. Excited but a little confused. I feel good because of the thought of moving on to better things. Love that one. There's an optimistic side to that for sure. Draining, but worth it at the end. Very nicely put. Thank you so much. Horrible, challenging. It's like a yo-yo. I keep having to go back to basics. Strenuous. Yep, that's it. Like sometimes you've spent so much time and you're like, oh, I need to like, start from the scratch. Yeah, completely understand. Thank you, everyone, for participating. And these are so good and so relatable. Very, but open to the challenge. That's really good spirit. Constantly pruning. Great. Love reading those responses. Thank you so much for responding. We're going to move on now. Now, I hope you're not feeling those feelings already, because sometimes when we think of those feelings, we can even feel them. And I hope that we can change that through this session. I think that would be our goal. But I'll let Tom talk about that a bit more. And on to that, so I will just say his name and I'll let him do the rest. He's an international advisor at Teach Horizons, has been with us for a long time and has also been a senior leader. But I won't speak more about him because he'll do that. His name is Tom Wild. And thank you again, Tom, for being here. And he's our keynote speaker. So I'll let him share his screen now.
Now you can see why I'm chosen to do the CVs and not the technical side of things. Hopefully we've got the right. Oh, 1 second. Okay, so we'll just go back 1 slide. I've got a taskbar that is just in the way of the button I need to press. There we go. Right, off to a good start. Now, some of those comments that people made about writing their CVs resonated with me in this webinar. The one about draining but worth it in the end, daunting. It's a while since I've done any public speaking, and I feel that this is likely to be also quite draining but worth it in the end for me personally, and I hope it'll be worth it for you personally and professionally. Now, I want to highlight that the photograph on this particular slide is not necessarily you struggling to write your CV, but it could potentially be the HR manager or head of school who's receiving your CV if you're making one of these 5 deadly errors, because there are 5 things that really are going to torpedo your chances. This is not by any means an encyclopedic kind of review of things that can go wrong with your CV. We would be here all night, but it is 5 things that you really do need to avoid. No excuses. And if you get these things out of your CV, you're going to be a long way on the way to success. Now, you may ask, well, who am I to talk? I've certainly generated some dismal CVs in my time, but like all of you here, I'm sure I'm a qualified teacher, an English language and literature teacher. I started my international career a bit over 20 years ago. I seem to have specialized in going to countries that I really had no idea about and had no original intention of going to, but then absolutely loved. So that included Tanzania, Qatar, Kazakhstan, Denmark. Super experiences. And 15 of those years were as a senior leader. former head of school at a couple of schools, and so I saw a lot of CVs. I did a lot of recruitment in 1 year, for example, recruiting 36 different teachers for one particular school. Just after the COVID pandemic started coming to an end, I joined Teacher Horizons, never looked back. I'm now a coach, mentor, and CV designer for the Leadership Ladder service, which is part of Teacher Horizons' additional sort of offerings. And as part of my role, I did a little bit of mathematics. I figured out that I look at about 6,000 to 10,000 CVs a year. It's about 20 or 30 a day. And so when I say that there's certain things that people do with their CVs that really don't work, you can trust me, you can trust my judgment. I'm looking at it with the question, do I want to speak to this person? And the key criterion for answering that question is, do I think the school is going to want to speak to this person? So I'm looking at it from both aspects. I've been on both sides of the interviewing panels. As you can see from my photo, I've been a fully paid up card-carrying member of the blue suit, tie and brown shoe brigade. I have been that person. And so hopefully the advice and the expertise I can share on CVs will be of value to you. Now, the absolute worst mistake you can make, as we say in the UK, is to include everything but the kitchen sink. If your CV looks like this, I can guarantee you that the head of school or the HR manager who looks at it, their heart is going to sink. And the difficult thing about the overly long CV is that it sneaks up on us in so many different ways. And that's why we've got these variants here. So the TMI, the too much information, this is where you have no idea what's really important, what's going to count with the school. So you just put it all in. You include every single bit of CPD you've ever done. You include every single certificate that you've ever been awarded. You include every part of every role that you've ever had ad infinitum, and you're just continually, putting more and more information. Some people put in their weight. Some people include their height. Some people go into their, the status of their divorce process. None of this is going to help you get the job that you want. So you really need to be pretty brutal about pruning that out. A further variant of this trap is what I call the X files. And this is where people bundle all of their documentation together with the CV. So you've got your personal statement, your educational philosophy, your degree certificates, your police clearances, all joined together in one enormous PDF file. Now, there are schools that will request this, but unless they've made it absolutely explicit, that is what they want, bundling everything together is going to be a total disaster. I've seen documents that are running to 28, 29, 30 pages. The HR manager, the head of school, is just going to heave a huge sigh when they see that. And typically, all of that documentation is going into the bin, either literally or digitally. So keep your CV as a CV, your personal statement as a personal statement, your covering letter as a covering letter. Label those files with crystal clarity, with your name, with the type of document it is, maybe the date, it's December 2024, Tom Wilde's CV, so that the HR team, whoever's doing the recruitment, knows exactly what they're looking at and they know exactly which file they're retrieving. Don't, agglomerate everything together. Now, the autobiography, this is where you have huge passages of continuous prose. Your professional summary at the start is like a mini essay going into great detail about all the things that you've achieved and the experiences that you're bringing to the table. And then every single role, again, there's just multiple sentences, going into the minutiae of everything that you've done, because these things are important to us. They matter to us. But what we need to bear in mind is they really probably don't matter that much to the person on the other side of the table. So we really need to have that insight into what is it they're looking for, what is the important information they're going to want, and prune everything else out. So be mindful that what's important to you, what's meaningful to you, may not be important, certainly not at this stage. We're trying to pique their attention rather than overwhelm them with detail. So avoid that tendency to be writing lots of purple prose and lengthy paragraphs and having lots of text in your CV. Then the final one, this is my favorite, the Word document dinosaur fossil. This is where, as you were approaching graduation back in university, which might be a few years ago, might be a couple of decades ago, you created a Word document, maybe an MS-DOS, maybe Lotus, it was even Lotus Notes, I'm aging myself, maybe, Microsoft version 7. You created that document because you knew you needed a job after you graduated. And ever since, every time you've looked for a job, you've gone back to that trusty CV, you've opened up that dusty digital file, and you've added another section. You've just added the latest job, the latest roles that you had, the latest training that you've had, any new qualifications. You just add them all, and it just builds up like sediment under the sea. Now, the problem with this is you're still updating the document that you might have created in the last century. And it's going to look that way. It's going to look as if, as a teacher, you're stuck in, what was current 10 or 20 years ago. So you really need to think about, what impression is my CV creating with the people that I want to impress? Does it look as if I'm still using, these antiquated Microsoft Word documents and I'm just updating it? Sometimes to the point where every single role on your CV indicates the start date and then the finish date is present. 2015 to the present, 2018 to the present, 2022 to the present, because you've never actually reread it yourself. You've just gone back, added the next section, and moved on. So all of these are really traps that people fall into with the best intentions, and they end up with an overly long CV that is just going to make everybody feel really quite depressed rather than impressed by what it is you have to offer. So this is absolutely crucial that you avoid this trap. Now, almost the opposite end of this spectrum is the style over substance version. This is where we've got all kinds of bells and whistles on the CV. Graphically, there's all kinds of things that are trying to grab our attention. We've got lots of graphics, we've got diagrams, pie charts. Here we've got, rows of dots indicating levels of expertise. 3 dots, I'm okay. 5 dots, I'm a superstar at it. The problem is the overall impression is a bit cartoonish. It suggests that, perhaps you're not fully mature in terms of your professional pedagogy. Maybe it's kind of a lot of flash, but not much solidity there. Lots of distracting icons, perhaps. There's a real trend currently for people to include university crests, school logos, and so on, all of which creates a very cluttered visual impression. Some people kind of emphasize, I really want to have a one-page CV. But unless you're just a couple of years into your career and there's really not much for you to expand upon, or if you're a superstar and you really don't have to, say anything, everybody knows who you are and what you've done, really the one-page CV is potentially, again, a bit of a trap. You really need to allow yourself generally that second page to go into enough depth about the changes that you've made and the impact that you've had in order to win a school's attention. So beware of the trap of, being overly flashy visually, having too many things competing for your audience's attention. You really need to focus on having strong content, clearly presented, but not in a distracting way. Now, one person, at least on the chat, was saying, it's really hard to know what to give importance to. And that's reflected in the kind of CV I call the labyrinth, where, as you can see in this example, the eye is kind of drawn in different directions. It's starting off with personal details. Well, nobody's going to get a job based on their date of birth or how many children they have or how many years of experience they've got. That's, basic box ticking, but it's not actually going to persuade anyone to give you a job. Then we've got education, but that's kind of across and below other relevant training. There's multiple different font sizes. Some is in bold, some isn't. Some things are sort of given emphasis with larger size type. So it's very confusing to know where to look. And you really need to think, when you look at your CV, am I giving the viewer a very clear pathway through the information I'm presenting? So for example, do I have my key qualifications somewhere near the top? because they're going to need to know that I'm a qualified teacher, that I have the qualifications that are absolutely required, alongside my work experience. Am I highlighting my most recent roles? Are those also immediately apparent? I was looking through CVs earlier today. I was 3 or 4 pages in before they even mentioned their work experience. And then it started with their first job after they left school, stacking shelves in a supermarket, or, doing retail in a clothes shop. So, you really don't want to keep your audience waiting. You need to present that information at the top of the page, very clearly visible, and with very consistent visual guides. So headings need to be consistent, fonts need to be consistent, bold, italic. If you use it in a very limited, consistent way. This kind of erratic approach just creates a sense of confusion. And that's going to hold you back from getting those interviews that you want. A very, very common error is the job description. And it's a very obvious one because A, it's bullet pointed, B, it's just a list of tasks that you've been given. The schools that you're applying to will know, if you're head of secondary, if you're a subject teacher, they will know that if you're a teacher, you plan lessons, that you have to have behavior management skills, that you're assessing students, you're monitoring attainment, all of these things. So listing bullet points that repeat all of that back to your audience is not going to be getting you any further ahead of the competition. Okay, so as it says there, if you're copy pasting, you're just time wasting. None of this is going to differentiate you from your competitors. What you need to do, rather than saying what you did, is explain, so what? What difference did you make? If you were the secondary division administrator or you were a teacher mentor, what impact did you have? Do you have a mentee, for example, who went on to become the deputy head of secondary because you had prepared them? If you're a teacher and you're assessing students, did you come up with a more authentic way of assessing them than just giving them, a multiple choice test or a pen and a piece of paper and give them 2 hours to write an essay? So all of the bullet points that you include regarding your roles need to be highlighting impact, ideally with evidence, not just listing what you did, because every single person who does the role of head of secondary or does the role of a secondary or primary school teacher essentially is going to have the same bullet points. So you constantly need to be thinking, how am I going to stand out? What's going to put me ahead of all of the other competitors for this position? Now, there's a kind of a constellation here of red flags. Now, these are not huge things, but they're things that are going to trip you up and are going to give that recruiter, that HR manager or head of school, a really good reason to put your CV in the bin. And that goes along with all of the time that you put into it, all of that blood, sweat, and tears you spent designing and framing and editing your CV because you made a fundamental simple error. So the first one is gaps in your work chronology. It's essential that anyone looking at your CV can see a very clear, complete chronology of where you've been and what you've done. Because as soon as I see a gap, I'm thinking, were you unemployed? Were you in prison? What was going on in your life at that time? We need to know. So if you were looking after an elderly relative, if you took a sabbatical and you traveled the world, if you decided to take some time out to study and build up your skills, make that explicitly clear with dates and ideally integrated within the rest of your work chronology. So with COVID, for example, a lot of people's work histories were disrupted, including my own. So it's really important that the HR manager looking at your CV knows what you did during that time. Why is there, a break? And, that you've given a reason and an explanation so that your work chronology, those months and years, all line up. Anything other than that is going to raise a red flag and a safeguarding concern potentially. Another key issue is if you've missed out key information. There's an amazing number of teachers who don't actually explain where their schools are. I'm not going to be spending a lot of time going through Google Maps to identify which state in the US a school was in or which country a school was in. There are lots of international schools called Oxford this, Cambridge that. If you don't specify the town, city, country where your schools were, a lot of people looking at your CV are not going to want to do that homework and fill in the gaps. They're just going to bin the CV. So you must include the locations. You must include, and you'd be amazed how many people don't, what you taught, what subjects or what year groups, what was your specific leadership role, what was your job title, and the curriculum or program that you delivered. So if it was IGCSE or IB diploma, AP, that's really fundamental information that you need to include on your CV. Now, everybody knows you've got to check through your CV. You've got to look out for typos or errors. The principal mistake, that's a well-known one, but it is so easy when you've looked through your CV that many times just to miss something. So it's a really good idea to get somebody else to look at it or to read it backwards, so your eyes aren't just glazing and running through it, just to make sure that you really haven't missed anything. There's some really easy typos, university. These are things that are really easy to miss when you've just looked at your CV again and again and again. Now, I've got a photo here of my former colleague, Danny, who was one of our CV legends back in the day. And he loved a really good inappropriate photo, when you're raising your drink at the bar in Bangkok. Maybe a wedding photo. A lot of people love to use their wedding photos, or they got dressed up for a friend's wedding. They've got a big spray of flowers, a really super purple suit. As one of our colleagues got married and was wearing a beautiful purple suit, but it's not ideal for your CV. So keep it sober, literally and figuratively. Keep it simple. Keep it professional, and keep it in proportion. If your CV photo is stretched or blurred or whatever it may be, it's not looking right. Essentially, you're telling the person at the other side of the recruitment process, I don't know what I'm doing with a computer. I can't do basic stuff like ensuring my photograph doesn't get stretched on a document. So that's not going to be a good look. That's not going to impress those people. So just make sure, no matter how long it takes or who you need to ask to sort it out, get that sorted on your CV. Get a professional photograph done if you have to. Get your school photographer to do a head and shoulder shot. Don't try and do a selfie with your smartphone. It's not going to look great. So that's a basic one. Another one that people sometimes miss is their email address. You may be a huge fan of Donald Trump. You may love Jesus. That's great. But don't use an email address that has something that may be controversial or that may not chime with the people you're trying to get a job from. Make sure your email address is as professional as possible and ideally very easy to remember. Schools will be looking at so many candidates. If they're thinking, right, I was talking to Henry the other day, and I think I'd like to, interview him again. They just want to be able to type in Henry or your family name into that email address box, and it immediately pops up. So don't have some kind of weird, hard to remember email address. Have something that's professional, but ideally just with your initials and family name, or name and family name, maybe with a couple of numbers, just so that it pops up straight away. Because again, if you're making people look up your email address, copy and paste it, it's more and more friction between you and the job that you want. Finally, the quirky font. Some people love to have beautiful calligraphic fonts. They love to have, Comic Sans. Maybe you've been a primary teacher that long that you can't break the habit. These kinds of fonts are anathema to a lot of heads of schools and a lot of HR managers. They don't like to see them. They often don't translate well from one format to another, so they look strange when it's being viewed on a different computer. So keep it simple, have a sans serif font, something contemporary. Stick to one, at the most two different fonts in your CV. Keep it simple, keep it classy. Now, a few ground rules then, a few sort of pathways to success. 2 pages is the ideal. No harm in stretching to 3. If you've got 20 odd years of experience and you've got roles throughout that period that are contributing to your narrative, by all means, go to the extra page, include it, rather than sort of truncating your CV unnecessarily. But once you get into 4 pages or more, you're really into the Badlands. That's starting to detract from the impression you're creating. Make sure your fonts, make sure your formatting is consistent. Have an appropriate photo. There's one there when I had much better hair than I do now. Obviously I've had to update that on LinkedIn since then. When more and more of my candidates were saying, "You're Tom," I started to realize it was time for an update. So make sure your profile photo is in the same decade. More importantly than that, make sure the prioritization is clear. So in this particular model CV, I've got my experience at the top, I've got my education in the sidebar. It's really easy to find what you need. The information is really selective. We're talking about years in some of these roles, but there's no more than 5 bullet points, I think, or maybe 6 bullet points for any of them. They're really brief, really concise. And the focus in all of that information is what impact did I make, not what was my job description. So somebody looking at that CV hopefully would see enough to pique their interest and say, "You know what, I'm going to give Tom a call. I'm going to send Tom an email. Let's talk," because they want to find out more. And a lot of people make this error. They think, "I'm going to make my CV an all-you-can-eat buffet. I'm going to absolutely put everything out there and hope that something is going to work." And of course, with an all-you-can-eat buffet, usually after about 15 minutes, you feel sick because it's just too much. It's much better if your CV is like an espresso, just a quick hit of information. Wow, that was great. What if I had a double? What if it was just that bit more? I want to find out more. You've whetted my appetite. I want to speak to you. Not, I already know too much about this person. I feel like I've sat and listened to their life story. I really don't want to know anymore. So less is definitely going to be more. Now, a few next steps. For teachers, we have a CV review service. This is a very cost-effective method of getting some really good tips on how to improve your CV. There is a link there. Kavi, perhaps we can put this in the chat later on, but of course we are recording this as well. This CV review service, as I mentioned, very cost-effective. It's about £40, and it's a great way of getting very clear pointers. What are you doing wrong? What are you doing right? What do you need to work on? What do you need to build on to have a good CV? If you're a leadership candidate, either aspiring to leadership or you're currently in leadership roles, we do have a premium service specifically for leadership, and it's a full CV design service. I create CVs for senior leaders. You can email me if that's something you're interested in, or you can go to the link about the leadership ladder and find out more there. Now, I don't know how much time we have. Kavi, how are we doing for time? Have I droned on?
We're right on time, so maybe another like one or 2 minutes max.
Okay, so I just kind of collected a little bit of a rogues gallery, and I do apologize if anybody here recognizes something from their own CV, because I kind of collated these from the last week or so. I just want to pick out a few. So we're right in the middle. Provide highly effective leadership and management. I love a really good unproven assertion. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm a really effective leader. I'm not going to give you any evidence. I'm just going to say that I am. And you can take that as a given. The one in green there, this is an actual comment. When you create a document and you can add comments to that document, well, this person had a CV coach who suggested, a few tips and said, only do that for the big buck jobs. That's fine. The problem is when you don't remove the comments before saving your document and sending it to a potential school. So that's not going to look too good. Top right, hobbies. I'm probably not going to give somebody a job on the basis that they enjoy reading and playing sports. So it's a bit like saying I like to breathe and drink water. Let's differentiate ourselves. If you like sports, maybe you like pickleball, maybe you like, ultimate fighting. Have something at least that's going to help you stand out. Key skills. I'm going to say that I'm really good at being creative and teamwork, and I'm going to prove that by having really long black bars. Again, it's just like a meaningless graphic. I'm going to award myself 5 stars for being organized. Again, put in information that backs it up, put in some evidence. This is essentially pointless. Bottom left, we have computer proficiency being declared. However, we can see a date of birth we can see probably about 4 or 5 different fonts being used, some really, lengthy underlining. We've got all kinds of muddled spacing and punctuation and so on, none of which suggests that this person has really got their grips with a spell check or punctuation check. And then let's just go to the top left. This is an opening paragraph, a professional summary. For all students, I consistently design diverse and engaging lessons that cater to a range of learning styles and abilities, as evidenced by the consistently positive student feedback I receive. My commitment to differentiated instruction was recognized during a recent Ofsted deep dive. Do you want me to go on? Probably not. If you're reading this CV, I'm thinking, if this is how you're writing when you're selling yourself as a teacher, what might your lessons be like? You really want your CV to reflect your personality, your professional qualities. So if you're saying that you're a really engaging teacher, probably your CV should be a really engaging document. Maybe it has some visual interest. Maybe you express yourself in a personal, perhaps slightly quirky way that doesn't just sound like an early version of ChatGPT. So have a CV that excites, have a CV that whets the appetite, that makes people want more. Have a CV that backs up what you're saying, and have a CV that doesn't go on too long. And hopefully I haven't gone on too long. I will now be quiet and I will stop talking and stop sharing. There we go.
Thank you so much, Tom. I love that how you had just a few slides, but you focused on some really important bits. And of course, thank you for also sharing from your experience and examples. So I really hope that everyone here also found it really valuable. Thanks again for presenting and sharing your valuable insights. All right, moving on now to the panel discussion. And for the panel discussion, I will share my screen just for the introduction, and then I'll stop sharing again because then it's good to see people when we're discussing and asking questions. So just before we start, the panel discussion is where we have panelists and they will be answering questions. And we've been taking note of some of the questions you've been already asking on the chat. Please continue to do that. And now is your time to ask even more questions. So just put a question in the chat, any burning question that you have related to the topic today, and we will pick those questions and our panelists will then answer those questions. And we have other common and more popular questions that we usually get asked, so we'll also try and get some of those in. I will let the panelists introduce themselves, but just quickly their names. It's Gudrun, Robert, and Tom, who was our speaker. He's also joining as a panelist. So if we could have our panelists introduce themselves one by one, and then I'll begin with the questions. So Gudrun, could we please start with you?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and all of that. So my name is Gudrun. Thank you for using my Icelandic spelling, by the way. Much appreciated. So I'm a senior leader on my second leadership position through Teacher Horizons. I was head of secondary, founding head of secondary at an IB school in Brazil, just outside of Sao Paulo. And now I'm senior school assistant principal at a school in Thailand. And so in these positions, I have looked at many a CV as we were building a school from the ground up. And that was a very valuable lesson for myself, but also many interesting takeaways that I hope I can share with you guys in this discussion. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Gudrun, for being here. Yeah, and it's great to have, as you said, someone who's looked at CVs, is in a senior leadership position now, has been in other positions, similar positions in the past as well. And then we have Robert.
Yes, hi, Kavi. Hi, everybody. My name is Robert, and I am currently a teacher at the American School of Kinshasa, which is located in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm also a teacher ambassador there for Teacher Horizons. I'm a teacher ambassador at TASOC, the American School. And I've spent my entire career working in the international circuit as a high school English literature teacher. And I've worked in the in the American program, in the DP program, IBDP program, and also in the British program. And I've worked on 4 continents, which was Africa, Europe, North America, and Asia. And currently, I'm on this panel, and if I can help in any way, I'd be more than happy to. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Robert. And that's with Robert, we have the perspective of someone who's applied to multiple positions and probably revised their CV multiple times, and it's great to have that perspective as well. And then, of course, we have Tom, who already had his introduction, so we're not going to do that again. But yeah, thanks, Tom, for continuing to join as a panelist. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. And I did make a list of questions from the chat, and we'll start from there. And then Fiona is also going to help us just continue to monitor the chat and jump in and ask some burning questions. So one of the questions that I see here was about by the way, just how it would work. So some questions I would be like, okay, I'm going to direct it to Gudrun because it seems like it'll be great to get that perspective. Some questions will be a bit more open and anyone can pitch in and jump in. So I think it's a bit of an open-ended question, but I think it'll be great to start with Gudrun. So this one is, which take precedence with employers, the CV or the covering letter, or does it matter?
I think if you'd asked me a couple of years ago, my answer might have been different. But I think with the advent of AI, it's very easy to say all the right things in a cover letter that may or may not reflect your actual philosophy. You may be tempted to say something that sounds better than what you may actually believe. And I find that with cover letters, even before AI, they all tended to blend into one. If I hear the word dynamic one more time, I might feel ill because everybody says that. And what makes you stand out? So I believe that the CV, personally for me, is what really makes somebody shine. I know it sounds like a bullet point list, and how can you possibly grasp everything that a teacher is through that document? But it is vital because it does tell a story. It is your journey through teaching. And I find that much more valuable than the cover letter, especially now when AI can turn us into whoever we want to be rather than showing who we actually are.
Great, that's very useful and valuable. And it reminds us, so we had this conundrum, like this dilemma as well, when we hired for us internally for Teacher Horizons. And what we ended up doing is we asked for videos because hopefully it's hard to make a fake video with AI, at least not yet, but maybe in the future. So we asked for 60-second videos in place of cover letters because we felt the same thing. Like cover letters, it's like how anyone could have written that. So really great insight, especially in the current times. Any addition or thoughts to that from Tom or Robert?
Yeah, I think on the cover letter, exactly as Gudrun said, you really want to stand out. So using AI is self-defeating. It will be generic, and you can say tweak it to sound make it sound more like me. Just start by being yourself. I think cover letters generally should flesh out what's in the CV. So the CV should be kind of the bare bones. In the cover letter, you might be able to give an anecdote, for example, or a specific example of that student who was going to get a G grade and you helped them get an A star, all those things that you did to support them, which you can't put in a CV. So I would have kind of specific examples or anecdotes that really bring to life who you are as a person, what matters to you, rather than saying, yes, I'm a true believer in the IB and the learner profile. As Gudrun says, we've heard it all before.
Thank you. Robert, you wanted to say something too? Yeah.
Yes.
Trial.
I just wanted to say that I found out that one of the trends in sending a resume and a CV is to have shorter CV letters and more effective resumes that highlight certain things about your experience. So as long as we're going shorter on the CV, I think the resume would be the best way to reflect who you are and what you've done in your life and what accomplishments you've had.
Great. Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone else is hearing a weird sound. I was hearing it. If you heard that too, I'm sorry. Is that, yeah, okay. Yeah, it happened again. So sorry about that. I'm not sure what that is.
Trial.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's keep moving on. Sorry. Maybe we can just, keep ourselves mute when we're not speaking. Here we go. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's move on to the next question. And this one, Is it happening for everyone still? That's so strange. Okay, we don't know what it is, so all I can do right now is apologize and keep moving on. This next one is also we'll start with Gudrun and we'll go from there. Beyond qualifications and experience, what soft skills or personal attributes should teachers, educators highlight on their CVs to stand out?
I think, as Tom was saying earlier, avoid the kind of subjective self-evaluations of soft skills, because we have no way of we don't have any proof of that. So you could say that I'm an excellent people person, and I only have your word for it. So I think that while it's hard to quantify soft skills, it would be interesting to show maybe something that is concrete, like conferences that you've participated in, something that you've contributed, any projects that you've done. So something that shows us that, okay, you are a people person, and you've shown that through something that you created, like a project that I created in Brazil, purely out of passion for the topic, was an international podcast project with schools all over South America, where I invited a BBC storyteller to teach students how to get their interviewees to open up, and then we invited a tech specialist to teach the students how to use the tech, and that was that kind of something that I felt was worthy adding to my CV, because it shows my soft skills as somebody who manages projects, who is able to bring people together, who is able to deliver an educational project that incorporated various soft skills. That's a personal example, but it is something that concretely shows the soft skills that I am able to bring to the table. So as for which ones, it would also depend on the job that you're applying for. But in all cases, I would say something that we can see as proof of this being true.
Great. Thank you so much, Gudrun. There's another question, and this one is for Robert. And it says, is it useful to get feedback on your CV from an expert?
Yes. I would definitely say get feedback. In fact, one of the things I could share with you is that my brother-in-law is the director of an American embassy school, and his best advice to teachers is to invest in someone who can help you to write your resume, or better yet, who can write your resume for you and really present a nice polished shine that has content that's worthy of having on your resume. And by saying a shine, what I mean is that there's good amounts of white space on your paper that isn't flooded with words. So definitely, if you can afford it, be about between $150, $200 to invest in someone who can help you out with that.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Fiona, are there any? Yes, sorry, Tom.
I would just add, I mean, if you think about the opportunity cost, rewriting your own CV, I mean, one of the clearest responses we had in the chat at the start of the webinar was, I just hate this task. I absolutely hate it. Everybody is daunted by it. It's boring. You get anxious, you get sweaty. What is it worth to you just to get somebody else to do that? Somebody who knows the questions to ask, to say, well, what have you done? What are you proud of? What's giving you satisfaction? And then formulate that on a couple of pieces of A4 in a way that they know is going to have the right impact. If you can have those evenings off to spend with your family, to have fun, watch Netflix, go out for dinner, and outsource it to somebody who really knows what they're doing and isn't anxious about it, but excited, that to me is one of the best investments you're going to make. Even if you get one extra interview from it, that experience, that practice, let alone getting the job, is going to be worth it. So, I think the cost analysis is absolutely in its favor.
Yeah, I was watching a YouTube video yesterday, and the person said that they pay an accountant $200 an hour so they can save them $20,000 a year. And it's one of those things because they are the expert, that's what they do, and it's the give and take, right? So yeah, thank you for that one. Fiona, any questions from the chat that we could
Sure.
focus on now?
We have a few popular topics. So the first one was regarding the pictures. So is it beneficial to include a photo, and is this something that should be done or not?
I think anyone can, yeah.
Yeah, open to anyone.
Well, I would say this. About 15 years ago, I used to do resume training for college graduates, and I used to insist upon that time to during that time not to put the photo on the resume. And what I found out was that I was using a Western model of writing resumes. So I think it really depends upon where you are applying to schools and what types of schools you're applying to. There are schools that I know are looking for photographs on the resume. I personally feel it could work for you or it could work against you. And as long as it could work against you, like, why would anyone want to place it? But I know that culturally, some places are more used to it. And so my recommendation is to go culturally, but I would also tell you to be aware of, where you're applying to, the institution you're applying to, and if it has a different culture base to it. Like an American school, I know from the schools I've worked at, and I've worked at several, you'd be better off not putting a photograph on the resume.
Thank you.
So
Any other yeah.
Yeah, my perspective on this, that's definitely true. And it's definitely worth being aware of what those cultural nuances. When I look at American candidates' CVs, they're almost always purely text. Visually they're quite dry. And one of the advantages, I think, of using a photograph, if you are applying to schools where that's going to be more of a norm, is that visually it's the first thing you're going to look at. It's giving your CV much more interest, because as human beings, we're hardwired to look at faces and to start to kind of assess, is this person a threat? Is this person friendly? So it's really important, if you do include a photograph, that it is professional, but it does look approachable. Again, invest in getting a really good photograph done, because, a lot of people think, well, it's going to be a beauty pageant, and, it's going to be an attractiveness question. But actually, you just need to look like a decent person. You just need to look like somebody you'd like to sit down and have a conversation with. This is a potential new colleague in your school team. You want to feel that they're friendly, they're going to get on well with parents, with students, with colleagues. So a nice smile, reasonably well presented professional attire on a CV for a lot of international schools is going to help, put a face to the name, literally, and help. But as Robert says, be wary, because, there will be schools where that kind of blind recruitment is going to be much more important. We're very conscious at Teacher Horizons of all kinds of issues of diversity and potential discrimination. That is something to be aware of. But just in terms of design, I would advise having a photograph on there just to kind of help make that personal connection.
Great, thank you.
And just to add to that, as again, sorry, personal experience, because of my name, it can be hard to tell what gender I am, and I would like for that to be known. I don't want people to default to being sir when potential schools reach out to me. So that's why I like including the photo. My initial reaction in the beginning was to not have photos to remove bias, but then, as Tom says, it is nice to put a face to a name. So I would recommend that. I had a LinkedIn photo professionally taken for this purpose, but I went and I treated myself and I asked for a makeup session and everything, but the memo got lost when I asked for a natural looking LinkedIn photo, and I ended up with fake eyelashes and rouge and everything. So that took a while to undo. Ended up with something that I liked after about 3 hours. But that did pay off. I'm very happy I invested the time in that to get something that shows off what I felt was my personality after I'd plucked the eyelashes off. So yeah, but it's for me personally, and I know that there are people out there, we don't have the standard Western names, let's say, and that might help us also build a character for the potential recruiter.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, especially from sharing from your personal experience as well. I personally have felt hesitant to share my picture, for the reasons of being a visible minority and just looking different in the past. And I've then gone from that phase where I've been like, well, this is who I am. This is my personality. And then, it's up to the person or the school or whoever's looking at the resume, and you just go from there. And it also helped me with like self-belief and being confident about your identity and who you are. And I can relate that, some people can feel the same way. But it's great to have these conversations. So thank you. Now, I am looking at the time, and I know we have breakout rooms, but it looks like there's a lot of questions and good discussion going. So I will, we kind of judge how it's going, and it looks like this is a great panel discussion. So a couple other questions I think would be very useful. One of the things, and we're going to go to Gudrun again, you know how sometimes you look at a CV and everything's looking great, but there's this one thing that puts you off. So has something like that happened with you, or like a common error that you were like, well, I would have wanted to interview this person if only they didn't like make this little mistake or something like that? And what would that be?
There are two things, and I'm trying to decide whether I share my kind of pet peeves, because there are a few things, like I don't like a CV that is in all caps because it feels like you're shouting your experience at me. So if that could be avoided, I think that's helpful, because I think it just looks more professional. That's a definite off-putting element for me. Otherwise, I think, yeah, because my philosophy has always been, because somebody opened the door for me, and I have made it my mission in recruitment, not just to always hire the most experienced person, but ensure a balance so that everyone deserves to get a first chance in international education. I really make sure I look out for the NQTs, the ECTs, to look out for people who are taking the first steps abroad, that I look at their CVs. And I think that unnecessarily people flesh out too much. And so that's almost like, filling in. So then the bullet points about what you did in your role, if you start saying I created dynamic lessons, I participated in lesson planning, it's almost like saying, as a woman, I did all the woman things. It's like Tom was saying, I breathe, I eat food, I go to bed. If you a good recruiter at a school that you want to work for will be understanding of limited experience, and they will hire you for all of your beautiful qualities rather than a jacked up CV with things that feel forced. So that for me is a bit of a turn off if teachers feel like they have to fill this 2-page limit when they are still taking their first steps. And if you do have somebody who is understanding of that, then that is a school that you would want to work for, I would say.
That's so useful. Yeah, thank you for that. So authenticity, just maintain that. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Abby,
Fiona,
could I
any
just,
other, yes,
sorry, I
any
was
other
actually going to
bigger
come to you.
themes, please?
Just because Gudrun mentioned newly qualified teachers, I know that there was a question to do with this, and it's something that I related to in the past as well. What could a newly qualified teacher include in their CV? So what kind of skills should they work towards, or maybe what should they do outside of work to gain a little bit more experience?
Do you want me to answer this one, or are
Yes.
you throwing it
So
out to all of
Gudrun, you
us?
can maybe start off, and then Tom and Robert can join in.
I think there is a careful balance to be struck with. What I would say, I'm opening this with so that people don't go off and sign up to the first club they see. But I think that somebody who is passionate about what they do, and that can show in the clubs that you help coach, that can show in the activities that you do. You could be the things that you would include on your CV, for example, you've been involved in the MUN club, you've coached cross country, supervised school trips, something that shows that you're committed and invested to your personal and professional growth. Don't go the other way, of course, as Tom said, to include every single webinar that you've ever attended, because then we end up with a 30-page monster CV. But do share these things, because that does show that you're committed getting to know students better. It shows that you are interested in holistic education, which is what I would be looking for as a recruiter in every position. But again, please keep a balance, because if it's the same as I say to students in grades 11 and 12 who are applying for university, don't do Rotary Club because it gets you into university. Do it because you care, do it because it matters to you. And that we will sense that in the interview. So I think for you to round out your experience, round out more horizontally than vertically, as it were.
Great. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I think just in general, whether it's your extracurricular contribution or, we saw the example of the very bland and generic hobbies that somebody was mentioning they had. You want to have a hook, you want to have a specific detail that's really going to catch my interest. So I say, for example, I like climbing mountains. So I mentioned a few that I've climbed because that's more interesting than just saying, mountaineering. People say, oh, I enjoy travel, or I do the MUN, for example, as an ECA. But what would be more interesting would be if you mention a specific journey that you went on that was particularly exciting or stood out, or a student at MUN who went from being very quiet and reserved and who really came out of their shell as a result. So it's having those specific examples. You can be concise in your CV, but you can still have detail that's actually going to be interesting.
Great. Thank you so much. We are reaching the time as well now, so we will end the panel discussion here. Really great questions. We hope we were able to cover most of your questions. If not, you can contact us at info@teachhorizons.com. Some people are asking about the CV review service and the leadership ladder. We also have career coaching service. We will send a follow-up email with the webinar recording of this session and also links to all of this important information. So all of that will be coming your way. And real big thank you to the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. It is really important and valuable for our community that you decided to take time out of your personal time and give back. And it was really valuable insights, especially from personal experience as well. So I took away a lot from it, and I hope that the attendees did as well. And we appreciate you're busy, so feel free to carry on with your days, and we will just move on to the next part of the webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a good one.